Patty got happy. Thank you. One of the things I learned about writing is that you can write as a narrative writer, a storyteller, or you can write in an analytical, precise fashion that is well documented and very clear and precise in language in which people can have to get a dictionary to understand, or you can tell a story. My hope is that through these talks, you begin to understand more difficult issues that arise in America. The Supreme Court rendered several cases that legitimize police irresponsibility for acts or actions they committed as a lawful officer of the law who was mandated to carry out certain acts. So if that person carried out these act or actions and he violated his or her oath intentionally, he or she were not culpable unless you could prove they intended to. That sounds kind of odd. It's like baby who ate the candy. How do you determine if he intended to eat the candy? He ate it. Well, what the court began to do, particularly in the case of Graham versus Carter, they stretched the meaning of qualified immunity even a little further. They said that the police, in the reasonable carrying out of his duty, can use fear of his life as a justification of the use of excessive and deadly force, that he feared for his or her life. Once this happened and police or police unions were no longer culpable, it began to be clear to me as a historian that police understood that they had nobody to pay for the song they were singing on our heads, and that society would not hold them culpable or responsible. And so what am I suggesting? Because we need to come to solutions on policy. Number one, there should be a law that kills qualified immunity or adds a caveat to qualified immunity, that the police officer must prove that he or she were acting under the cause of reasonableness when they use force. They have to explain which actions set them off during the course and not those who are aggrieved or offended. Number two, police unions should be responsible for paying for legal cost of officers who have a history of aggression and suspensions for force against citizens that they are lawfully required to serve and protect. And then finally, there must be a recollection of the mind on the part of Supreme Court justices and federal courts that holds police agencies responsible for their actions like they hold citizens responsible. At this point, it appears that every discriminatory act or aggressive action that goes against people of color or poor people, that it is justified by the court, who sees the police job as a crappy job. So, what am I saying? I am saying that we need to fix the loophole in qualified immunity. We must have a law that balances the scale for justice. And then finally, we must create a set of standards that are not flexible for the deadly use of deadly force, a national set of standards. Thank you.
Doc, I want to go back several years ago when we used to talk about this. I never did understand it. But then you told me that, yeah, police, they can get charged, but for the most part, they won't be convicted. Can you elaborate more on that and why you told me that when, you know?
Well, I said that.
Police...
I said that because bias plays a big factor. Societal bias. They have these fancy words they use that calls it implicit and explicit bias. Implicit is a kind of benign actions of the person that leads to an act or action against somebody. You did it, but it was not something you were really trying to do, and you didn't essentially see the person that way, but it happened. Explicit means that you saw the person in a discriminatory or derogatory term, and that you had the law on your side, and you used that law to aggressively carry out what you saw was your interpretation of the law. So when they go to court, you are given a jury of your peers. Since whites make up roughly 75% of those who are police officers, they usually get a jury of their peers, but they also use a judicial tactic called change of venue. Change of venue was a tactic that they used, particularly in the South or places like that, where if you got a jury that was prone to convict in one area, you went to another area where you would probably find a more sympathetic jury. And that sympathetic jury, if they found you guilty of anything, would be lesser and included offenses, like doing the killing that was a battery charge. That essentially that this was a negligent thing, that you hit him and the person died, not intentionally, he died accidentally. I don't know how you shoot somebody in the back 7 times. There's another tactic that I've seen, and I've studied a lot of these films, is that when police ask you if you have a weapon, most people say no now. Because if you say yes, and the police officer wants you out the car, his response to you is, don't go for that gun. Don't go for that gun. Because you have let him know that you have a weapon in the car. And he is letting you know that he can use terminal force. So whatever he asks, you should do. And if you resist, he is using terminal force, not because you have the weapon. If you take the bias factor, he's using it because he feels he's losing control of the stop and the arrest. Am I making sense?
Yeah, and as I want to bring this back to to education, since you brought up the implicit and explicit bias. The incident just happened in Kenosha about a month ago.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that I just read. I read about this, and this is how I feel. The majority of our teachers in America are white, and the number of students now in America is now, for the first time, majority minority. And it's I think it's just human nature that if you don't know your students, you get misperceptions about them. So take, for instance, Kenosha is about 40 miles outside of Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
And Milwaukee is probably one of the most segregated cities in America.
Yes.
But what I was reading about it is that in Milwaukee, there's only 17% of the population Um,
It was black.
no, 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 no. 17% of the population. Now, this is what bothers me. Uh, are teachers,
Oh, okay.
minority teachers, right?
Okay.
So that means the remainder of those teachers are white.
Okay.
The 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 achievement gap is off the hook. Black kids are not being successful in school. But here's where I'm trying to tie this in, and help me out if you think I'm going the right direction. I'm all way
Okay.
because the teaching staff is so predominantly white, and the kids are failing, and most of the kids in Milwaukee public schools are black. You have this, I guess, recognition or um, that okay, these kids aren't going to achieve, so I don't have to put my best foot forward. So most of the people, I'm just imagining here, I'm just guessing. I'm guessing that most of the police officers in Milwaukee come from the suburbs, and those suburbs, like as we would say, like Austin has Kyle, Buda, Georgetown, Round Rock.
Hmm.
I'm thinking that most of these police officers come from places like Kenosha, since it's a suburb. And I did not know this, but the black community in Kenosha is the it is disproportionately. It's crazy how many of those black men and black folks in Kenosha are incarcerated. It doesn't fit the population. So as you talk to me about this, and you said this many times about the explicit and implicit biases in the police force, don't you think that it comes from our teachers? That
I don't I
our
don't
teachers are
see
our teachers
I
are
don't
not.
see I actually don't see the direct correlation to the teachers. I do see an indirect correlation. What I see is that there's an absence of achievement responsibility on the part of the teacher system, that they are not being held to the standard that they had held what they call black colored teachers for achievement in black schools or inner city schools. They would essentially uh, defund inner city schools. However, those same teachers, if you move them to a suburban school, the achievement triples. It's not that black kids in in uh, in Kenosha underachieve that much. I believe. I think it is because they have no motivation. They have no classroom motivation to get them going. They don't feel sufficiently motivated by the presence of the people who are teaching them. And so, what am I saying? We can only solve this with policy. There should be a policy in Kenosha that in a majority minority school, that it should reflect the numbers of the students. If you go to a school and black students make up 80% of the population, a minimum of 48% of the teachers should be African American or somebody from the African diaspora.
Mm.
This has to do with motivation. You see, because you motivate people, and students are motivated by people who they feel has compassion and some passion for them as well. You've known me for a long time, and very few people would understand this, but you would. I have had far more white students than I have black students on the graduate level.
Yeah.
And I have put more people in PhD programs or assisted more people get in PhD programs than probably the most people at my school. But what I found was my colleagues did not come to me and value that until they realize that I was the one doing it. No matter how many times somebody said, Dwight got this person in or that person in or help this person get in or made a phone call and did this, it was not recognized. Why was that? Because there is this kind of preconceived notion that Dwight teaches some kind of history that is so far removed from the histories that others teach. Now, don't get me wrong, I get respect from my colleagues, and I don't see them as bad people. But what I have to get you to understand is even in college, there is this bias you bring into the classroom. What I bring into the classroom is a little different. I bring into the classroom empathy. I also believe that there should be rules and regulations that are malleable, that the rules and regulations fit the situation and not necessarily that the rules are ever fixed. You can't bend them. I have found this because I said on disciplinary hearing and other things, that even in disciplinary hearing, if a Black student went before a white disciplinary committee, he or she was probably 80% likely to be found guilty. And I sat in on quite a few cases where it was clear that the Black person wasn't guilty, but the white person cooperated and testified, and the Black person, which I couldn't understand why they didn't say she copied my homework, felt that she was upholding some kind of friendship with the person. Then it turns out, later they found out that I was right, that the white student had been the one who had copied the work and not the Black girl. I was able to keep them from suspending the two students and created a requirement by the teacher to redo that assignment. Now, if I had not been on that, one girl who was absolutely guilty would have stepped away. You know what they were going on? The fact that there is a cultural thing that Black students do in the presence of authority, particularly white authority. They have a nervous laughter. They have a nervous laughter, and they have a kind of, I don't care, kind of mentality that they give off, but in truth, they're frightened to death. They're frightened to death. And somebody says, well, Dwight, how did you pick that up? Hell, I've been that student. And so what am I saying? I'm saying in order to change outcomes, we must change input.
Okay, I get that, Doc, and I'm gonna come back at you with this.
Okay.
We know the teaching force is not going to change. That those demographics are not going to change anytime soon. So isn't it incumbent upon schools and school districts and teachers to understand that, hey, for the most part, we're going to be teaching people, because most of these administrators and teachers are white. So don't they have to understand that we're going to be teaching kids that don't look like us, and we are going to be teaching white kids who do look like us, and that we need to teach them about the explicit and implicit biases that they have, and they've gotten these signals either from home, or it's been codified, or not codified, but it's been magnified in the schools. Well, so isn't it? I should go back and apologize to all the teachers, because I used to be a teacher in K through 12. But don't schools, school districts, and teachers owe it to not only to their students of color, but the white students also, to show and teach them that these biases are not good, because eventually, these guys
Here's a problem.
Police officers.
It's not enough to acknowledge that biases are not good. We must create a proactive approach to correcting bias. State of Texas has created this idea that you can have African American studies in lieu of U.S. history, whatever. My problem is it should be both. And that you know how I teach. I teach African American history within the context of the broader historical changes
Yeah.
in the United States. So I'll start talking about the New Deal, and people be looking at me, what they got to do with black folks? Hell, black folks win the New Deal. Because when you teach cultural, ethno-cultural history within the context of major historical events, students hang on to it and realize that they were a part of the historical record. And it seems to motivate them more. But what you are asking is, does the school lead to incarceration for students ultimately? And I would have to say, in certain areas of the country, that is a qualified truth. Because once you get a criminal record in the juvenile courts, if you cannot escape that or get appropriate mentorship and get somebody who can help redirect the behavior of not only the student, but the teachers, then that student is on a path toward further incarceration. But the worst part of that is he is on a path, or she is on a path to failure. And when you fail, then you don't have adequate training, you don't have the rudimentary skills you need. And so here's why I think the system does worse than prison. It does not prepare them for even life as a person to work in a warehouse.
Exactly. That's my point too. That's one of my.
Now, I agree with you there.
Yeah.
But I don't see it that like we came up with systematic last week, and I thought systematic was wrong, but I thought institutional would work better. I don't see a linkage that they sat down and made a policy, or they thought about it that way. But there is a law of unintended consequences too. We got to start thinking about that. While we didn't think this was going to affect them, when you sent this little girl to the juvenile court, you talking about the record to be expunged? No, you can't expunge the experience of sending a 12-year-old Black kid to school for defending themselves when their white peers jumped on them because their white peers' mother was wealthy, had a lawyer, and pressed charges against the child, when it was clear and witnesses said that they had attacked the little girl. But here's what I'm finding. When explicit bias is part of the school's leadership, minority students suffer more disproportionately. And understand something, and I've seen this over and over again, that much of the school's leadership, even if they are a minority, even if the principals and vice principals are minorities, they are operating with a set of rules that victimizes the students who come in for discipline. So what do we need? We need some policy changes, number one. We also need an investment. Excuse me. We need an investment. We need an investment on the part of policymakers who see communities of color as potential and having the potential ability to transform not only themselves, but to help transform the state of Texas. Well, we're in Texas now, so we'll use that. Problem for me is the way current capitalist order works. They don't see raising students' intellectual ability above 6th grade or 5th grade any more important. Here's what I think: every student should read on the 9th to 12th grade level, but average student is reading what, on 4th or 5th grade?
Well, I know
right?
when I was in the Army, they they wrote the manuals. Our manuals were written at a sixth grade level,
That's what I mean.
sixth, seventh
And
grade.
even then, you had to have some people had to be tutored.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So I begrudgingly see your point, but I don't think by design it's set that way. But the law of unintended consequences does affect it, and you see more and more kids go because once you're in the system, but Roger, there's some other factors involved.
No, I understand that.
There is a societal stigma attached to you when you've been suspended 2 or 3 times. But then there's some other issues involved. There is extreme poverty. Just why people are raising the concern about getting people back to school. Some were doing it for political reasons, but others were saying we need to get them back to school so kids can eat.
Mm-hmm.
Man, if educators' motivation is to feed students, man, we got a serious problem, brother. And so here's what I believe. These after-school programs that we had when I grew up, Boys Club, other clubs, that the school district should partner with those, and food should be tracked to those organizations who watch kids at the Y and other places like that. In most cities, guess where kids go? That's where the food should be sent to. And that in times of crisis, poor people still got to work, but the kids can go up to the rec center and pick up their dinner and lunch. So what does that do? It elevates the students from an embarrassing position of being hungry. Because if you're hungry, you can't do anything. You're not going to learn. You're not going to learn. And we should thank the Black Panther Party.
Oh, I know. I know.
For creating
Yep.
the school lunch program and
Right.
breakfast program,
Mm-hmm.
and coming up with the idea of Head Start. You know, I think it's important for us to realize that African American history can help transform America if you take a person like myself, who is mostly retired now, and allow him to mentor these public school teachers. That's a post-career job you can offer to somebody. That I bring in a master level or PhD level teacher to improve the base knowledge of my teachers so my teachers can teach better. You
No,
see what I'm saying?
I really understand. One of the things that I'm working on is I really do believe that teachers and administrators can change the trajectory of race relations
Oh, they can.
if if they understand that the importance of their part in changing race relations.
Well,
like I said,
here's the problem. I think we got to get our panties off our damn shoulders too, man. That we can't go around denying that Jim Crow didn't exist. We can't go around denying that my mama used to have to walk to work because the bus was full and wouldn't stop and let her stand up in the aisle because she would have had to stand in the white area. Come on, man. That's true. We know that. So what can we do for it not to happen again? And so here we are. We got a president in office who, for the life of me, has picked the issue of resegregating America, but clouding the issue by saying he's a law and order president. He's really not saying that. He's saying I'm going to reimpose racial segregation and order imposed by police authority. So who is he talking about controlling? He's talking about controlling minority communities because that's all he's identified. Chinese,
right.
Mexicans. He started off the program, Mexican dope dealers coming in and they rapists, and then he started talking about Black criminals, and then when he fell on his face with the Central Park fire, he didn't have enough man in him to apologize. But yet this white boy who we saw take a gun to a peaceful rally, shoots and kills 2 white fellas,
Mm-hmm.
and hurts another.
Yeah, yeah.
They're saying he acted in self-defense when the truth of it was he came up with a gun and approached them, and they told him to leave with the gun.
Mm.
And he said he wasn't, and so they were pushing him away from it. When he fell, he started shooting. Nobody aggressively attempted to approach him. These guys stopped when he pulled the gun. But if you look at the pathology of this guy, he said that he was going to use his gun to restore order. What kind of order can a 17-year-old restore? What kind of order does he or she understand?
Yeah, I don't get that.
But Roger, I think it is important to understand that the culprit that we are facing is ignorance. Is that this president has been very effective of using ignorance as a tool to gain control of people, because they are not getting nothing. They ain't getting no tax break.
They're not.
They ain't getting no extra money.
No.
They're about to lose their house.
Yeah.
About to lose their apartments.
Yeah.
All of these things. And they stand out in the streets and they argue about a man's right to not stand at the Pledge of Allegiance or national anthem. And to be very honest with you, standing for the national anthem and Pledge of Allegiance wasn't a big deal. And the NFL didn't used to do it.
Yeah, they didn't. Yeah.
They didn't.
No.
But this has nothing to do with this. This is a set of imposed nationalist standards that they want to force upon others as a segue to having greater authority and dominion over others.
Mm-hmm. Well, I got a question. I was in a discussion with this black young man, and he's not the first one that I've had this discussion with too. He tried to equate the plight of blacks in a Democratic administration and a Republican administration, and he said that both of them were bad, and that because of that he said, why not stand with Trump? And I asked this young man, I said, do you understand that this guy is actually going to make it worse for people who look like you and I? And I said, what are you looking at? So can you explain to me how why Trump has so much support with black men? Because it to me is counterintuitive.
Part of it seems to be that Trump has this macho appeal, and he's saying stuff like political correctness and all that kind of stuff. That's a buzzword for I can be rude to other people. A lot of black men supported him under the myth that he was going to do something new. Well, you saw he didn't do anything new. As a matter of fact, African American communities got much worse.
Yeah.
And what they didn't take into consideration when they were talking about all the jobs created was that all the jobs that they took out of circulation for people who were underemployed or had been critically unemployed. They stopped counting those people. And the only people they were really counting were the people who had worked, got laid off, and were out of unemployment. So those who they were counting. So these guys are saying they're not going to vote. I think it's a personal affront to me as a black person who has seen people fight and die for this. I don't think it has anything to do with Trump. It has to do with the sense of powerlessness black folks truly feel. And so they want to throw off the burden of that powerlessness by voting for the oppressor.
Yeah.
This is essentially a thesis that Malcolm X would argue, that you would eventually have to figure out which evil is better for you. And Trump has shown me as a thinker that he ain't operating in my wheelhouse. He ain't came to my neighborhood to talk to me. He ain't sit down. Now, people are saying the Democrats got to do something concrete. They got to do this, they got to do that. Well, what's the percentage of African Americans in the country?
It's at 13%.
13?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's factor in minorities in the country. What's the number? 40%, right? 41?
I don't know.
Or a little bit higher. If you factor in all minorities, and let's just say last time Black women voted over 90% for Trump. Black men
for
who voted.
They voted for Clinton.
For Clinton. Yeah. And Black men who voted, 80 something, who voted.
Yeah.
Okay. The 13% who did not vote was a group of people who listened to Fox Radio. And what lost me about this is why listen to Fox? Why listen to Fox News? Because Fox News is a propaganda station. It never, ever, until recently, talked about anything that extolled the virtues of Black folk. Until recently. When it looks like Trump had, for one person at Fox, or two people at Fox, had just pushed it a little bit too far when he started talking about veterans. Again, this wasn't the first time he said veterans and soldiers were losers that got caught or captured. He said he didn't like losers. John McCain was a loser. And he said soldiers who got caught, I don't like them. So soldiers who went to war and were captured as prisoners of war, he don't like.
No, that wasn't it. He said they died. Those who died, he
said
that
too.
He said those who died. He said those who died were losers and suckers. I mean, as a soldier myself, I don't like the guy. I don't like the guy anyway. But really, after that, man, I mean, I lost.
The issue is, I heard this thing that Republicans are supporting him because they're afraid of.
They're afraid
and
of
you emasculate Black folks because you're afraid of us. Come on, something ain't right here. If you're afraid of Trump, treat him the same way you treat me. Because there has not been a policy designed by the current Republican regime in the last 20 years, designed by them to advantage Black men or Black people.
No,
or even equalize.
No, it has not. Which is, I mean, I understand you're going to have some Black people who are conservative and who are going to support the Republican Party, but this man's a straight out racist. I mean, he doesn't care about us. He really doesn't. Well,
here's another thing. You got some strategic Black folks too, who are supporting Trump because they see their hopeful relationship with the Republicans as strategic. That if they stay with the Republicans, they'll be part of the ruling elite. But if you read that book I recommended to people by Judith Murray Brown, that ain't gonna happen. Because driving Republican men is not race, but theocracy. They're women, and race is a factor to unite them. It unites them in a common brotherhood, which means everybody else is outside of that. If you ain't a white woman, or if you ain't a Christian elite or a wealthy white elite who sides with us, then you out the picture. I would recommend a book to everybody if they want to understand the theoretical framework of what the right attempted to do. And now people keep forgetting how influential Ralph Reed, Christian Coalition, the Tea Party with Mark Meadows and those guys, how powerful they became, but also how influential as a coalition group inside the party. They hold enough votes to help you carry or kill any bill. You see what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Doc. Again, the hour's almost up.
Yeah.
They went by real fast again, as it normally does when we have a conversation. So, is there anything that you want to say to wrap this up?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Go ahead, Doc.
I want us all to consider who we are as people and how we would like to be treated. And come to understand that until we establish that common link between us, we're going to be plagued by racist attacks by that 7 to 8%. We're going to be hurt by a vicious economy established by billionaires who control 88% of the economy. And you know it's bad when there are other billionaires who stand up and say, hey, this system is exploiting the poor. You know it's bad. But to quote Warren Buffett, I didn't need the tax break. I did, and I didn't get one. And so as we end tonight, ask yourself this: what did you gain from Donald Trump? And what did you lose? And if the negative can't outweigh the positive, then you support him. But look at it honestly. Thank you.
All right. Well, everybody, that's the end of this series that I call Messy Progress. And this comes from Hegel. And Hegel says that progress is messy. A lot of people don't understand that concept, but it is.
It is.
Progress is messy. And I will have some more of these messy progress conversations. May come back again with Doc when something else pops off. But I hope you guys like the conversation. If you have any questions, we're going to try to make this next time I do talk with Doc. I'm going to try to make it live and interactive so people can actually
ask
questions. And I may have to go down to Doc's house.
Yeah, we'll set it up.
So everybody, I'm glad you tuned in, and hope y'all have a good weekend. And then let's get ready for the week. All right.
All right, brother. Take care, man.
All right. Bye.
All right.